Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and it's time for a very early Nahida Math Guide 1. I think this might be the earliest Math Guide 1 that I've ever done, but it's okay. We have Nahida here, the stats, and the signature weapon. I'll have a separate session this time around to talk about the signature weapon. But first off, let's talk about Nahida's stats. Her base attack is not that high, it's 299. It's okay. Defense is okay for a Catalyst character, and she has EM as her Ascension stat. Okay, HP is also okay. Average, maybe slightly better than Catalyst as a 5-star. That's all. Because Catalyst characters usually have very low HP. So we'll talk about her kit in totality. We'll talk about talents, passive, signature weapon, constellations, and I'll do an overall kit summary. And I'll share a little more about energy generation, rotation, etc. and ICD, what we know now anyway. There will be more information coming in the next few weeks, so I'll update them gradually along the way with the other math guides as well for her. Okay, so first off, let's dive right in. Let's talk about her talents. Okay, first off, it's a normal attack talent. It has a very simple name. It's just called Form. But it's actually the most adorable normal attacks I've ever seen. Instead of Form, it should be called Dance Dance Revolution Form or DDR Form. If you guys have seen the animation, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Now these are the attack values at level 10. Level 9. So it's not too bad. I mean, it's slightly better. I would say it's on the higher side for Catalyst characters, although the charge attack is about the same. And as with all charge attack character, with all Catalyst characters, the charge attack stamina cost is high, 50. And the reason why I show her normal attacks is because there is some merit to playing her as a main DPS. I'll talk more about that later. Now let's talk about her E. Her E is literally the most important talent in her entire kit. So first off, elemental skill, E, all schemes to know. There's a press mode and a hold mode. You see that there are different varying levels of damage, right? And you see one Tri-Karma Purification here, where it skills off of both attack and EM. Now, if you think about a typical character where you build their attack versus where you try to go attack more or less fully along with crit stats and versus you build the EM fully, basically, if you look at the percentages, right, you know that usually you have a 2k attack and for a full EM you have a 1k EM. So if you look at the percentage figures, it's like a 50-50 split skilling. But this is the first time we have a talent multiplier that skills off of EM directly. So that tells you how important EM is for her, yeah? Now, I don't want to go too much into details on the rest of this. Let me go into the text or the analysis that I've actually given. I know it seems a little bit complicated, but it's not. So Nahida's E has two forms, like I said, press and hold. In press, what she does is she does a quick tour around. AoE is kind of like an oval shape around her with the sides being long, the left and right. And the enemies hit are marked with something called Seed of Skandha. In hold mode, she goes into aiming mode that looks like a cutesy camera with a rectangular border. The rectangular border is bigger than crosshair. But when you're marking enemies with the whole E aiming mode, it's actually instant once you pass over the enemies, which means it's very fast for you to mark all the enemies. Just look at all the latest animations, okay? The gameplay animations you see. The marking is very fast. Just pan your camera around and you'll be able to mark all the enemies. And it's not limited to the border. In fact, I think the border is really more for her passive in terms of harvesting resources, but we'll talk more about that later. So in a way, the best way I can explain this is it's kind of like the recent event where you scan weaknesses of enemies instantly and mark them. Okay, so for Nahida's E, she deals damage to them. This is damage, press and hold, and she marks them with Seed of Skandha. Even the whole mode marks them with Seed of Skandha, the press does it as well, both. Now, the whole mode, which is the aiming mode, it lasts up to 5 seconds and marks up to 8 opponents. Whereas for the press mode is simply how many you hit. But you wouldn't really take up to 5 seconds. I think 2 seconds will be done. 2 seconds will be done for the whole E. Now, what is Seed of Skandha? Because you hear me talking about press and hold both applying E, right? So this is the official description of Seed of Skandha. It's really long, but I'll just quickly go through it. Okay. Essentially, what happens is that once they are marked, they will be linked to each other when you trigger any elemental reactions, any, there's already an updated animation showing this because I know people will argue with me about the N. This should not be N here, honestly speaking, it should be all to prevent any confusion. But we all know the standard of the English text in the English description in Genshin, right? So initially when I saw this, I was also thinking, how can it be so restrictive? So I expected that it was an English issue. And yeah, it really is because there are already updated animations showing that any elemental reactions will trigger the Trikarma. You don't need to have damage from Dendro core at the same time. So what happens is that either you trigger elemental reaction, any elemental reactions triggered, sorry, not you, any elemental reactions triggered. So if the environment somehow triggers it, right? Like if they are standing next to one of those pyro flowers or cryo flowers, they can get and an elemental reaction happens, it will trigger your Trikarma. This is one condition. The second condition is whenever they take damage from Dendro cores, which includes Virgin and Hyperbloom and Bountiful cores. It's already tested. So what happens is that Nahida will unleash something called Trikarma Purification on the opponent and all connected opponents. So you don't need to trigger one, or trigger it only on one opponent who is also marked and linked to the rest of them within a certain distance. We don't know what's the distance yet. And all of these contended opponents will take the Dendro damage based on her attack and EM, which is what we saw just now, right? It skills off of EM directly in the talent multiplier. It doesn't skill, her EM skilling is directly in the talent multipliers. Now, you can trigger at most one Trikarma Purification with a short period of time, and essentially it's 1.9 seconds. So it's not that great, right? 1.9 seconds. But there is reduction that can be done via the rest of the kit, and I'll talk about that later. So effectively, anytime you trigger a reaction on any, I shouldn't say you, because any reaction trigger on any marked enemy, or if any marked enemy takes damage from Dendro cores, Trikarma triggers if it's not on the 1.9 second cooldown, which is the default cooldown, on all marked enemies. So it's kind of like huge AoE damage, right? Can you imagine? Now the only thing is that Trikarma does have a cooldown, so even if you trigger it on different enemies, I do believe that the Trikarma only happens once. Unless Trikarma's purification interval duration is enemy specific. But it should be character specific, i.e. What do you call it? Nahida specific. Okay, so if it's not already obvious, the Sea of Skandha effect is an off-field Dendro application, right? Because it lasts 20 seconds, it procs every 1.9 seconds by default. It has the longest Dendro duration so far, 100% uptime, because the cooldown is like 5 and 6 seconds. So it's great for Nilou, it's good for Cyno. Why only good for Cyno? 30%. 30 seconds is perfect for him if you consider rotation set time. So 20 seconds is still not quite there yet. However, this is just the duration. But what's the condition for the Dendro application? The condition is for the mark to be on the enemies, which means you see this line erase, okay? If enemies die, you're gonna lose your Dendro application. So technically speaking, it's not great for Cyno at all. It's not even good. Okay, if you notice where I'm saying that it's good for Cyno here, it's purely talking about the duration. But once you look at this, you know that it's not good for Cyno. Because the moment if you're up against a bunch of enemies, once the first wave dies, if your Cyno is already in his queue, you're in trouble. Because you're not able to switch back to Nahida to reapply her E. So I'll say it's time to hopium for good Dendro support for him. But for boss though, Nahida still works for him and is in fact better than DNC and Kole. Because for the boss assuming the boss doesn't die, this lasts 20 seconds. But we talk about how frequent the Dendro application is as well. Because if you realize it, right, 1.9 seconds, if the standard ICD then is like double, 3.8 seconds, not that great. But once you have a Q reduction, maybe it'll be better, but even the Q reduction requires Nahida, not Cyno. So, and as of now, there's no info on the unit gauge yet. Also, Trikarma has direct EM multipliers, not simply EM skilling passives. So EM is going to have a really high priority on her, and she has EM skilling passives as well, and I'll show you guys later. She kind of has three different areas where she skills off of EM. Now with shot, if the shot cooldown on both the press and hold, right, only 5 seconds and 6 seconds, and how effective the aiming mode looks like now, I think press should only be used if you manage to group all enemies together. Otherwise, it should always be hold. Okay, now her talent really needs me to talk a lot, but don't worry, I'll step you guys through it. Okay, so her talent reacts with Pyro, Electro, Hydro, kind of like how the DMC does, but there's no damage for her Q. Her Q works as a buff to her E. So you have the Pyro, where you gain a damage bonus to the E, the Trikarma damage. If you have one Pyro character, 18.9%. If you have two Pyro characters, 28.4% at level 9. And these are the percentage figures at level 12. For Electro, you get cooldown decrease. Okay? One character, this amount, two characters, this amount. If you hit level 12, 0.33 and 0.5 seconds. You start to see how it comes together, right? If you somehow have two Electro characters, this 0.5 seconds is going to be applied to that 1.9, so it's 1.4. And since there's ICD, then it's 1.4 plus 1.4, that's 2.8. So she applies an element every 2.8 seconds. Okay. Hydro, there's a duration increase. It seems to be the duration increase for her Q based on the description, and I'll talk more about description later. So for one Hydro character, if you have one Hydro character in the team, it's 3.78 seconds, and 5.767 if you have two. So these are the figures for the level 12. It's a 15-second Q with a 13.5 second cooldown and 50 energy. So it's pretty good. It's 100% uptime. So let's talk about the skill description itself. Okay. Basically, it manifests the Court of Dreams and expands the Shrine of Maya. So she summons a huge Q with the Court of Dreams, and the entire AoE within the Court of Dreams is the Shrine of Maya. And these are the effects that will be unleashed based on the elemental types present in the party. Okay? So like I said, the damage bonus is on the Trikarma, the cooldown decrease is on the Trikarma, the duration increase is on her Q itself. So if there are at least two party members of the aforementioned elemental types present when the field is deployed, the aforementioned effects will be increased further, which is the 1 and 2 characters I talked about earlier. So essentially her Q is different from typical Qs. It does 0 damage. Although, okay, you think about it, it's kind of similar to Bandit's Q, right? It's actually very similar to Bandit's Q. But we should even much bigger AoE. Okay, so instead of damage, it provides buffs simply based on the elemental types present within the party. So it's kind of like Gilded Dreams how it works. Okay, but here's the thing. For Pyro and Electro, if you look at the description for Pyro and Electro, it requires Nahida to remain within the Shrine of Maya. What this means is that she's required on field to get the corresponding buffs. So if you want the Pyro, the damage bonus on the Trikarma, Nahida needs to be on field. If you want the cooldown on Electro, Nahida needs to be on field. Do you start to see how this whole thing comes together? It's kind of like only Nahida main is good, or if you control your timing so good that when the cooldown starts, right, when the hit happens, right, you also make sure that you switch to your Nahida. But that's going to be way too tough. Likewise, so essentially, right, for Pyro Electro, unless you don't want, if you really don't want to use Nahida main, you want to do a quick sword, right, you have to somehow be able, if you want to utilize this Q, you have to be somehow be able to make sure that when Trikarma happens, your Nahida is there. You swap to your Nahida on time. So it's not easy. Okay. So this Nahida on-field requirement honestly is kind of weird. So I think design-wise for viewers wants to force her as a mid. The electro effect looks really good. The faster procs, faster reactions, more damage in the same duration. But again, she has to be the mid. Okay, she has to be the mid. So it looks like she's actually a good replacement for Tighnari in the Tighnari, Yae, and Grass Bradcom. You think about it, if you really think about it, right? Or maybe even Kole. Replace Kole, you have Tighnari and Nahida. and you try to quick swap around. And I think she's an awesome replacement for DNC and Kool in Nilou, but she still needs to be the main. Okay? Did you see where I'm coming from? Her Q only works when she's the main. For Hydro though, I'm not sure, and I'll talk about it later. So effectively for Cyno, her Q, you will not be getting the Q buffs, right? If you think about it, because Cyno is going to be on field most of the time. You're not getting the Q buffs. So her Q is kind of useless. But her A1 passive will help. How her A1 passive works, I kind of have to jump it a bit, yeah? Her A1 passive works when you unleash your Q, it does give a EM buff. Okay, maximum 200 EM to the active character within the field. So think of it this way. For Cyno, her Q effect doesn't buff her Tri-Karma, but it still gives that 200 EM to Cyno. Okay, I'll talk more about in terms of the overall case summary, how it is like for Cyno, how it's like for Nilou. So like I said, her Q range is insanely huge, which makes the buff conditions much easier to maintain, although even if it only applies to Nahida on field. Even if Nahida is off field, it's still a 200 EM buff with huge range for active character. I don't understand why people are saying that her Q range doesn't matter. Are we not playing Circle Impact? You're playing the same game as me, right? It's Circle Impact. And when the Q range is so big, it makes it a lot easier. If you use any character that do not snapshot Bennett's Q buff, trying to stay in Bennett's Q is a huge challenge as well. Okay? It's not always doable. It really depends on the situation, the combat situation, whether the enemies are too far away, etc. Stuff like that. But her Q range soft set. So stop saying that it doesn't matter. Okay? It actually works like a huge buff range. Now, for Hydro, there's no mention that Nahida needs to be on field. So I don't know whether she needs to be on field. But let's say if she does need to be on field, that means that she has to be the main. But then again, to begin with, even if it's off field, right? Even if she can be off field, I can tell you that this Hydro, this Q effect, it's not that impactful. It's nice, but it's not that impactful because we already have 100% uptime on her Q, even without Hydro in team, right? It's 15 seconds duration versus 30.5 second cooldown. If you have Hydro in the team, it can be something like 19 to 22 seconds, depending on the talent level. Depending on whether you have C3 or C5. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's C5. C5 Nahida. If you have C5 Nahida, if you have level 9E, level 9Q, it should be something like 19 seconds, thereabout. So it's like a 4 seconds difference for the EM buff. So that's why I say it's not that impactful. Don't worry about her in Nilou with regards to her Q. We are talking about a 4-second EM buff difference. Okay? I mean, it's definitely good, nice. It's definitely great to have. But if you're using her in Nilou, if you're using her as the main, Nahida as the main, it's not an issue. Trust me. And I'll go more into detail on that when we eventually do the com videos. So effectively, in Nilou, you get a longer EM buff on your active character if Nahida is not required on field for the Hydro effect for the Q, or on Nahida if Nahida is required on field. So what I expect for this Nahida being required on field, it should be for when the Tri-Karma hits, she must be on field. But that's assuming that when you swap out of Nahida and you swap back in, you still get the buff. Because if it's a case where it doesn't, then obviously you can't swap out. But given that the description didn't say that it ends the moment she swaps out, right? Unlike Cyno's Q, for example, I do think that it's possible that she does get it, but we will need more testings and more leak to show us the information. Yeah, so that's why for at least for kit analysis I can do it now. For the actual com rotation videos, yeah, I'm going to wait on those animation videos to help me do a better theory crafting per se. Okay. Now, if you are not using Nahida, even if Nahida is required on field for Q Hydro effect to work, it's not the end of the world. Okay, it's just a 15-second 200 EM buff versus 19 to 22 seconds for Nilou. But for Cyno, it is quite detrimental if it's not against boss. So to be honest with you guys, I think her Q is really, really good for her as the aggro spread main DPS. Okay? It really, really feels that way. It really, really feels like her Q is meant for her as a main DPS. Or for you to somehow time your Tri-Karma, assuming it works that way, somehow time your Nahida swapping onto the field every 1.9 seconds or 1.4 seconds. Yeah, the every 9.0 is not realistic, right? Okay, so that's her Q and her E. So I hope you understand how she works now, at least a little bit of it. But it's not complete if you don't let the passives, right? So let's look at the passive. Now, her passive has a very, very interesting effect. It allows you to use the camera mode, her aiming mode, to interact with the harvestable items and actually harvest them with just taking with just kind of like taking a picture of them. It's really, really good. Okay, think about violet grass or her essential materials, the Kalapata Palata, I'm not sure what's the pronunciation, lotus, the one that's on the cliff. So just stand across on some other cliff, go into caramel mode and reverse resource harvested. That's good, right? But it doesn't work for scarabs or onikabutos, which are two of the toughest resources as well for Cyno and Itto's like Hazel. Yeah, I'm sorry guys. Now, as for the other effects, apparently it can trigger this other effects that's mentioned here, right? Apparently it can trigger unique dialogue with some NPCs. So that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Have a bit of a different type of fun to have. Okay, let's talk about the next passive, which is Compassion Illuminated. When unleashing Illusory Heart, which is her Q, the Shrine of Maya, which is her field effect, will gain the following effects. EM of the active character within the field will be increased by 20% of the EM of the party member with the highest EM. Okay, so important, this is the party member with the highest EM. It's not even Nahida. It can be Nilou. But whatever the case, the maximum is 200, which means all you need is 1000 EM. Okay? Now, before I go further, just remember the EM talent multipliers that Nahida has on her Tri-Karma? Now you get further rewarded for her building EM on her, allowing her Q to provide EM buff and it's 200 EM, the highest F2P team buff so far. Oh wait, that's Sucrose, right? Okay. One of the highest. Okay, on top of that, her Q has a huge, insane range and 100% uptime, plus extended duration with Hydro in team, which makes it very easy to maintain 200 EMT buff if it's really activated with the on-field. Now, I saw negative comments about her insane Q range. I was very surprised. Because it's so good with this passive and it removes the field impact syndrome. Come on. Or circle impact, whatever you want to call it. Also, I'm still seeing people comment on like only one character having high EM and trying to force all the reactions to be on that one character. Please watch Nilou Math Guide 3. Okay, the meta is shifting. Team EM buffs are very important now. And Nahida gives you freaking 200 EM on passive, not Constellation, even if it's only on an active character. So it's similar to Sucrose. Now, you can argue that Sucrose is even better because Sucrose gave it to the entire team without any field, right? That's true. But Nahida does other stuff, right? You cannot just compare. And this is like when people use that EM buff to compare Kazuha and say that Kazuha is just a 5-star Sucrose, where Sucrose is better. What do you guys think now? Okay? Yeah, I'm not gonna go further. I'm not going down that road. And the best part, it doesn't require Nahida to have 1000 EM, just the character highest EM. Okay? But in the first place, a fully built Nahida should meet this requirement as well. So this is nice. Nice to have another EM skilling on her part, per se. Although not necessarily her. On the next one, each point of Nahida's EM beyond 200 will grant 0.1% bonus damage and 0.03% crit rate to Tri-Karma Purification from all schemes to know. A maximum of 80% bonus damage and 34% crit rate can be granted to Tri-Karma in this way. So basically, by skilling EM, by going EM on her, you get 80% bonus damage and 24% CR on Tri-Karma. Wait, I need to say this. So you need 800 plus 200. I remember there was something I wanted to correct, and this is the one. So you think it's hard to build high EM on Nahida without giving up Dendro Goblet and Crit Circlet? Here's the passive to help you with that. bam, 80% damage bonus, which is almost double a damage goblet, by the way, and 24 CR, which is almost like a CR circlet, okay? Almost like a CR circlet, just 7 CR off, 2 rows off. And this is just from your EM. And all you need is 800 plus 200 EM because it's beyond 200, right? So it's 1000 EM total. So remember the 1000 EM here, and then you have the 1000 EM here. So now the balancing factor for this passive is that it only applies to her Trikarma and not all her damage. However, Trikarma is her main source of damage, right? And it's a way of continued Dendro application too. So don't worry, I will eventually explore and compare the artifact builds, but it does look like double EM crit or triple EM is an optimal build based on this. 366 anyway. Okay? I'm quite surprised with this setup really. I mean, this passive is so good that it's a bit ridiculous. It's kind of like C6 Nilou, right? Except that it's useful. Except that it's actually useful. Okay, let me quickly talk about signature weapon. So this is the signature weapon effect. Let's go back to the weapon itself. So it's one of those low attack weapon with very high EM, 265 EM at level 90. It's a freaking genie lamp instead of a book, which is awesome. Now let's look at the weapon effect. Okay, weapon effect. Where's my weapon effect? Yeah. Party members other than the equipping character will provide the equipping character with buffs based on whether their EM, the elemental type is the same. If their elemental types are the same, this weapon effect will increase Nahida or the wielder's EM by 32. If not, increase the equipping character's damage bonus from the elemental type by 10%. The aforementioned effects have 3 stats, and more importantly, wait, didn't realize that this was cut off. Just add this in. All nearby party members other than the equipped character with their EM increased by 40. So this weapon effectively gives everyone in the team 40 EM. It's not much, right? Oh, and there's one such statement here. Multiple such effects from multiple such weapons can stack. So I don't know whether it's like the millennial, I can't remember what's the description, but the Freedom Swan and the allergy effect not being able to stack. But this, on the other hand, says that it can stack. So I don't know whether there will be a future weapon that is part of this series. If they can stack, then it will be pretty awesome. Okay. Now, firstly, like I said, the EM is very high, 265 EM at level 90, so it's very nice given how heavily she skills on EM. There's so much text here, so let's break it down. Okay, it's very simple. If Nahida is the solo Dendro in the comp, this weapon will give her 30% damage bonus. Okay, this effect, along with 40 EM to the entire team and 265 EM from the subset. If Nahida has a Dendro battery, so 2 Dendros, this weapon will give her 32 EM and 20% damage, 20% Dendro damage bonus at R1. So effectively, how you think of it is very simple. Each Dendro character provides another 32 EM, and then you reduce the 10% Dendro damage bonus. But I would say that typically a 2x Dendro character should be the max, especially in like a Agra spread comp. So I would say this effect is pretty decent. In most of the comps, you either get 30% damage bonus or you get 32 EM plus 20% damage bonus. I mean, it's decent, it's not like super groundbreaking, but it's okay. Because you gotta remember, like other characters, right? The effect that they get may be higher percentage in the figure, but it's not elemental. This is her element, right? Usually it's like either the E or the normal attacks or the charge attacks gets the boost for signature weapons. It's pretty decent. And there's also 40 EM given to the other teammates, which is okay, I guess. One thing though, the refinement scaling is a bit off for this signature weapon. I don't know whether it's an English translation or anything, but basically the EM buff to teammates skill very badly. It's 2 per refinement level, which means at R1 is 40, at R5 is 48. But the damage bonus scales very well. Instead of 10% per stack, it actually goes to, instead of 20% at R5, it's actually 26% at R5. So what you get is either 78% Dendro damage bonus or 64 EM plus 52% damage bonus at R5. So now Goblet is looking worse and worse for her if you are C6 R5, right? Sorry, not Goblet. Yeah. But okay, but C6 is a bit different. I'll talk about it later. It's more about R5. But there is a close contender EM-wise in Sacrificial Fragments, so it remains to be seen how much better this weapon may be versus Sacrificial Ferrets though. That will come quite far in the math series. We'll do the comms first. Okay? So I hope you understand how the signature weapon works. Her kit is so unique that I have to spend so much time to explain. Okay, constellations. I'll try to go faster. Okay, so C1, basically what happens is that when she uses a Q, and when the elemental types are being tabulated, you will always have +1 on each type. So what this means is that you will always have the bonus from 2 elemental types as long as you have one of them. So technically speaking, you can do like a rainbow comp. Nahida +1 Pyro +1 Electro +1 Hydro. And it will be calculated as 2 of them each. I mean, it sounds good, right? But it's actually very, very small impact. In terms of constellation value, I can tell you it's really very small. Because in the first place, the 1 and 2 character difference is not big. So even if you have a rainbow comp, maybe you can truly optimize this, but even then, I don't think the C1 effect will be big. Yeah, I don't think the C1 effect will be big. It's going to be difficult to calculate this C1 effect. Wait, not difficult, but tedious. Yeah. Okay, that's C1. So C2. Now C2 is the one where I have to spend a lot of time because it's I think it's a huge point of contention for some folks as well. Opponents that are marked by Nahida's own Seed of Skada will be affected by the following effects. Number 1, Burning Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Burgeon damage, reaction damage can score crit hits. So what this means is that the transformative reactions can score crit hits. Crit rate and crit damage are fixed at 20 and 100% respectively, which means that you can't buff the crit rate. Okay, it's always 20 CR and 100 crit damage. Your characters, your Nahidas, CR and crit damage do not affect this. Let's make it clear. And the second effect is within 8 seconds of being affected by Quicken, Aggravate, or Spread, defense is decreased by 30% on the marked enemies. It's really good. I'll show you. I'll break it down for you guys. Okay, this is a Archon-worthy constellation. It completely changes how you think of Dendro transformative reaction, right? Because it makes you score crit hits, but the crit rate and crit damage are fixed. So I can tell you effectively, right? It's actually a 20% damage boost. It's very, very simple. It's actually a 20% damage boost on average. But let's put things into perspective, okay? A 41k Nilou Bountiful core can crit to become 82k 1 out of 5 cores. That's how you read it. So, like I said, it's an average 20% boost to the Dendro transformative reactions, which is the Burning Bloom, Hyper Bloom, and Burgeon. And this includes Bountiful cores, okay? With a chance for higher than 20% boost if you're lucky, right? Right? Because it depends on your luck. But it can also be worse if you're unlucky. So it's a bit of RNG, but on average it's about a 20% boost. Maybe you're lucky, you get more than 20%. If you're unlucky, maybe you don't even get that 20%. So yeah, it's giving you RNG on reactions damage basically. Now for the non-transformative reactions, which is your quicken, aggravate, and spread, here's a 8-second 30% defense debuff. And I'll say this is pretty good. And OP if you have well-built characters who can be used of the aggravate or spread even if off field, like Yae or Fisher. Why? Because this 30% defense, or actually don't even require them to be off field, right? Because this is her E, not her Q. Yeah. This 30% defense is a decrease onto the marked enemies, i.e., all other talent damage plus aggravates and spreads against marked enemies when you have Nahida C2 gets a 17 to 18% boost with this different shred. And the argument that this different strat is not that great because it doesn't work for Dendro reactions doesn't apply here. Because it works for aggravate and spread, and you should be utilizing this in the aggra spread comp anyway. Think of it this way, okay? Nahida plus Kole plus Yae or Fisher plus Cookie, okay, healer, sustain. In such a comp, all reactions and all talent damage all get that 17 to 18% boost. Okay? Understand this. It's not just the reaction damage that gets the 17 to 18% boost. It's all the talent damage from everyone in team. This is why it's OP. Now, granted, if you are doing Hyper Bloom comms, you will trigger Aggravate and you will also trigger Quicken and you will also trigger Hyper Bloom, right? So your Hyper Bloom will not stand to gain from a defense strat. Let's be clear, okay? Your Hyper Bloom will not gain anything from the defense strat. But your talent damage still stands to gain. That's number one. Number two, your Hyper Bloom still gets average 20% increase from the crit portion. Just to be clear. But I think this is still very OP. Because it's 70 to 80% boost for everything. Okay, everything. At least the aggravate portion. And as for the Bloom and Hyper Bloom comps, it really depends on how your characters are built. If you are built such that you are fully reliant on the reaction damage, then yes, it's only a 20% increase for you. But if your other characters, their talents are level 9, their artifacts are good, their talent damage is decent, you will see decent damage boost from the defense strat. So personally, I can understand if you are doing Hyper Bloom com, you are happy that the defense strat doesn't work for the Hyper Bloom. But you have a 20% crit boost, right? Don't be too greedy, okay? but if you are doing like Aggra Spec com works beautifully for the 30% defense strat for the 8 seconds. If you are doing Nilou com, which is your pure bloom, right? You can crit. You will not have critical and aggravate spread, by the way, when you do Nilou's comp for the bountiful cost. So to me, right, I actually really see this C2 as a boost for two different categories. 20% for bloom related and 17 to 18% for aggravate plus spread plus talent damage. Okay, talent damage, let me repeat. It's good because aggravate plus spread comps in the first place, aggra spread comps, is usually very dependent on the talent damage as well, right? You do high talent damage and use the aggravate and spread to boost it further. That's how it works. So that's really good. Okay? I find myself saying okay a lot because I find it surprising that there were people that saying that C2 is not good because the defense strat doesn't work for Dendro reactions. But in the first place, the defense strat is meant for aggra spec com. If you think of it that way. Okay? So that's C2. C3, very straightforward. Her E comes before her Q constellation wise, right? Because her E is her main damage dealing. C4, when 1/2/3 or 4 or more nearby opponents are affected by her Seeds of Kanda, which is the E effect, Nahida's EM will be increased by 100, 120, 140/160. Now, it may not be easy to always get 4 or more enemies, right? But the good thing about this constellation is that with one enemy, it already has a high EM base, which is the 100 EM boost. Even against one enemy, you get 100 EM. So that's already very good. And the skilling is very low. It's just 20% more per enemy. So I guess it's more like it's nice to get more from more mark enemies, but it's not an issue even if it's single target. And since her C2 and her passive already give such good team buffs, her C4 works for herself. So it's kind of like Nilou in this aspect. Okay, C5 pretty straightforward, and to be honest, it's the lowest constellation value, right? Now C6. When Nahida hits an opponent linked by her E Seeds of Skanda with normal or charged attacks, after unleashing her Q, she will use Karmic Oblivion on this opponent and all connected opponents, dealing damage based on 200% of Nahida's attack and 400% of her EM. So this damage is considered elemental skill damage and can be triggered once every 0.2 seconds. So I guess Kagura's Verity sounds really good on her, right? which is Yae Miko's signature weapon. Oh, and this can be triggered once every 0.2 seconds. The effect lasts up to 10 seconds and will be removed after Nahida has unleashed 6 instances of Kami Oblivion. So essentially, other than Tri-Karma, by using Nahida's normal attack and charge attack after Q on any marked enemy, you can trigger 6 instances of Kami Oblivion on all marked enemies. So it's really like Tri-Karma. It works exactly the same as Tri-Karma. In fact, it's like a slightly better version of Yelan C6 with a bigger AoE, right? Because Yelan C6, the AoE is pretty decent, but this I'm pretty sure the AoE is even bigger because it does damage on all the marked enemies. They can move around and you still do damage as long as they are still linked. We don't know what's the maximum distance yet. Okay. And also, coincidentally, the scaling of the, or rather the damage of Kami Oblivion, right? Not scaling, sorry. The damage of Kami Oblivion is actually similar to Tri-Karma Purification at level 12E. It's also considered E damage. So effectively think of it this way, okay? Her C6 adds 6 more level 12 Tri-Karma to you in a very, very fast manner, in a bursty manner, like how Yelan C6 works. Do you see now? And it is prop based on her using normal or charge attacks, which if you use her as a main, it will naturally happen. Even if you use her as a quick swap, you can do it like how you use Yelan, right? It's C6 Yelan. You do the E, you do the Q, you do the E again, and then you spam your five attacks for Yelan. In case of Nahida, it's 6 instances. Now the weird thing though, is unfortunately the A4 passive doesn't work on this Kami Oblivion, which is kind of weird, right? Because it means that you should go EM damage crit on her then at C6. But I guess it doesn't matter since if you're getting her at C6, you already have the real level EM team buffs, and this coupled with the EM from her kit plus her signature weapon will give you 1000 plus EM, even with EM slash damage script. You see how the whole thing goes, yeah? But nevertheless, it still means that the Kami Oblivion will do less than the Tri-Karma if your Tri-Karma is already at level 12, at the same talent level, same multiplier level, because you are missing the A4 passive effect, the one that adds 80% damage bonus and 24% CR. So yeah, don't know why it's like this. And also we don't know how the ICD and unit gauge for this Kami Oblivion will work yet also, but it's definitely more instances of Dendro application. That's number one. Number two, I actually have a feeling, okay, lastly, with regards to the CCH, I actually have a feeling that a future beta change is going to make the A4 passive work on Kami Oblivion. Otherwise, just too disjoint, right? Well, that's my thought anyway. I don't know whether it will really come true. But even if it doesn't, I'm still pretty sure that this is a huge boost, a huge bursty nature like Yelan C6. Like Yelan C6 is one of the best I've ever have have the pleasure of using, and it's definitely my favorite so far. Yeah. Itto is close. Itto is close. Being able to constantly spend the CA is also extremely enjoyable. Okay, so with regards to the Constellation conclusion, quick one. C1 looks good on paper, but I don't think it's going to be high value. Unless Rainbow or maybe a Hyper Bloom. But even then, I still don't think that it's high value. Okay? Yeah, maybe I should change this. It's not unless, it's even. C2 is crazy good. Akon level good. Okay, gonna see how I broke it down. C3, C4 should be average. Maybe C3 will be bordering on good, while C5 is slightly the worst in value. C6 as a bigger AoE Yelan C6 is almost like a guaranteed awesome. Okay, it's a guaranteed awesome. Seriously, Yelan C6 is one of the best in search DPS in this game. So before doing any detailed math, I'll say that C2 R1 looks like a very good target now. But I'll do more math before we eventually do the constellation comparison and refinement comparison. Okay. Okay, next, kit summary. Finally, we hit the kit summary. Let me just change the music, okay? Don't get me wrong, I like that track, but it kind of interferes with me talking. Okay, and on a moment. Okay, so we have the kit summary here, and my freaking Excel is failing me. Okay, this should be better, right? Okay, sorry for the skip in the music, yeah? Okay, it's working now. So key summary, let's talk about it. So after going through so much on Nahida, right, how is she? Number one, she's not the 100% off-field Dendro applicator that most people are hoping for. I'm going to straight out say this. Okay, she's not. Her off-field Dendro application is conditional because it's based on mark enemies. What this means is simply, if enemies die, you have to reapply her E and reapply the Seed of Skandha. So effectively, against bosses or elite enemies that are buffed in event challenges, yes, she works like 100% off-field Dendro applicator with a 20-second duration. Because they managed to survive until for that kind of duration. However, against waves of enemies, she's more like a quick swap, where you have to swap her in to recast her E and mark new enemies that have spawned. So what does this mean for Cyno? Against bosses or elite enemies that are buffed in event challenges, Nahida is better than DMC/Kore as the Dendro support for Cyno. But in all other scenarios, DMC/Kore is better, unfortunately. So it's kind of sad that she's a conditionally good support for Cyno instead of always. And that condition is only bosses or elite enemies that are buffed. So it's tough, I know it's painful. But it's more hopium for the next Dendro character, I guess. So I don't think I need to update Cyno map for her. Unless you folks are interested in just against bosses. Okay. Now, moving on. What this means for Nilou in a Nahida DMC/Kore Nilou Kokomi/Barbara comp. Against bosses or elite enemies that are buffed, Kokomi main is still feasible, but you basically get a 15 seconds 200 EM buff instead of ascended by her Q. If we assume the worst case scenario that her Hydro also needs her to be on field. Okay, if I assume that worst case scenario, which I'm not sure until we see more leaks. In other scenarios, you either use Nahida main or you use Kokomi main until you have to swap Nahida in to recast E. So think of it this way, okay? Even if her Q doesn't require Nahida off on field for the Hydro effect, your Kokomi main is not going to be like a rosy scenario where you use the N2D, the 7 N2Ds straight in a row. Because unless the mobs don't die. Okay, if the mobs die and you need to reapply Dendro, you need to switch back to Nahida to reapply Dendro, and then your Kokomi doesn't get her Q effect anymore. So that's one thing to consider. Honestly, it's probably easier just to main her, but we'll have to see the impact to the Dendro Hydro triggers, right? If you do a Dendro main, you can get maybe too much triggers. Maybe, okay? I'm not saying that it will. So using Kokomi Q until Nahida Quick Sword may still be better for the Hydro Qs, Hydro trigger. Like, you know, even if Kokomi's Q is used for like what 2 seconds, and then you have to Quick Sword to Nahida, I think it's still okay because it still helps with the Hydro application and ensuring that we get Hydro triggers, for example. But I'll explore that in future math guides. Yeah, I'll explore it in future math guides. No worries. But yeah, it's looking like Nahida main in this comp looks really good. Or either a quick swap, a frequent quick swap. Okay. Now, given how her Q works, based on what I can tell now, she works best as either a frequent quick swap or a low duration on-field main. Her potential looks to be the best in air grass spread, with strong off-field characters with high talent damage like Yae Fisher. Fisher not that high for talent damage. She's more of her passive. Or in Nilou comp as main/quick swap too. So what I'm thinking of in terms of like quick swapping, what I mean is like you do a E to reapply your Seed of Skandha, and on top of that, maybe you do a normal attack and a charge attack to reapply Dendro, to also apply Dendro because ICD. So it's like you get 3S Dendro application. You swap her in for 3S Dendro application plus refreshing your off-field Dendro application and swap her out. And this is obviously after the initial action we do with Q, okay? Which means maybe she can quick swap with Tighnari if you think about it. Maybe she can quick swap with Tighnari. So i.e. you have Nahida and Tighnari together. So Nahida quick swaps in, then you switch to Tighnari. Tighnari finishes stuff, go back to Nahida. It actually works out. It might work out, but I have to do the rotation in detail to see how it really pans out Stats wise, she's very greedy like most Sumeru characters. Maybe other than Nilou as an off-field character. Nilou as an off-field character should be the easiest to farm for. Stats wise. So Nahida will need high EM, attack, CR, CD, and some ER. So in terms of artifact main stats, I think right now, based on just this analysis, is double EM crit or triple EM for F2P and EM damage crit for spenders. I'll do the math to be sure. Maybe once I do the math, maybe even EM damage crit is feasible. But yeah, let me do the math first. So artifacts wise, 4-piece deep wood if you should solo Dendro. I mean it's straightforward, right? Unless you somehow want to give 4-piece deep wood to some other character in a comp where you have a solo Dendro, which doesn't really make sense. Okay? And use Gilded Dreams if not. If it's in a double Dendro team, then you use Gilded Dreams. If it's a solo Dendro, then use 4-piece deep wood. Now I will do artifact comparison in future, and I'll probably include something like 2DM and 2GDWT for the scenario for double Dendro. Because solo Dendro, you definitely need 4-piece D-Wood. You cannot afford not to have the 4-piece D-Wood effect for solo Dendro comp. You just can't. But come to think of it, the two comps that I talk about, Nilou and Agraspat, both of them are double Dendro actually. Yeah, both of them are double Dendro. Ideally. Okay, so if you want Nahida, you pretty much need to spend all your resin in the Deepwood / Gilded Dreams to Artifact Domain, which I guess is better than having to farm 2 like Nilou, although Nilou is easier to farm for stat-wise. Even though her Q doesn't do damage, she does still look really strong. Okay, especially her E. But her E does have a longer interval because of ICD, right? So it's like every 3.8 seconds without electro character in her comp and her being on field with the Q effect. So maybe it's not that great. That's why I say she's really like a quick swap character. She's not an off field Dendro applicator. She's like a quick swap where you quick swap in and apply, quick swap in and apply again. You know what I mean? Quick swap in, remark the enemies, reapply a few more Dendro, swap out. So she's really not the 100% off-field Dendro applicator that everyone is hoping for. She's a quick swap character. She's a frequent quick swap character. That's how Hoyoverse has designed her, unfortunately. Good thing I wasn't desperately hoping for like 100% off-field Dendro applicator anyway. Because think about it, right? Really think about it. If a Dendro Archon is so boring, it's not good, right? They should design a Dendro Archon to be more interesting this way. Objectively speaking. I know people are feeling the pinch of not having that a stronger Dendro applicator option, but be patient. There are more Dendro characters coming, people. Okay. So next, as usual, right, for Sumeru meta, I'm dropping solo damage calculations. Nahida's ICD. Okay, there's no ICD on her E-cast. Again, this is another reason why I say that she's designed to be a quick swap character. She's a frequent quick swap character. No ICD on E-cast. Trikarma has standard ICD. Cannot be reset with E-cast. So what this means is that it's really every 3.8 seconds or every 2.8 seconds if you're level 12E with 2 electro characters in team. Oh, it's a big condition, right? Yeah. So this can be a bit painful for Nilou if you don't use her as a quick sword. But like I said, I will do math based on her being the quick sword in the Nilou because that's the way she's designed to be. Okay, it's back to like the whole principle of playing the character the way it's designed to be. Like Nilou with her bountiful cause. So for Q, since it doesn't deal damage or apply element, it's not applicable for her ICD wise. Energy generation, Nahida's E does give her 3 particles from your initial E hit. Trikarma does generate any 3 particles, does generate 3 particles after X seconds. But we don't know the details yet, whether it's like 100% chance to trigger after a certain duration, or it's a percentage chance to trigger after a certain duration. We don't know. No information yet. I'll update again in future math guides. But her E being able to give 3 particles with a 5-6 seconds cooldown and with her design as a frequent quick swap character, it's actually good because imagine if you're going to quick swap in again, you get another 3 particles. You quick swap in again, you get another 3 particles. So you may get up to 6 to 9 particles in one rotation. It's pretty decent, right? Pretty good. And her low energy cost, don't forget, 50. Yep. Nahida's rotation in general. So I see 3 potential areas. One is main DPS, right? You do the EQ, you do the normal attacks, and the charge attacks. Quick Sword is kind of similar to the main, but you may not use the normal attack or charge attacks, or maybe you just use them one each, and basically you sword in wherever required. That's how the Quick Sword is going to work. Once the mark enemies are dead, you have to sword her in and mark again. That's how it works. Off-field Dendro against boss. That's why I say I put a big there's a bracket here against boss. Okay, that's a very important bracket. Because what this means is that you do a EQ and you switch to your main DPS to do damage. Her off-field Dendro should still work, but the problem is that it only applies Dendro every 3.8 seconds. It's even longer than Cole's. Yeah, Cole is every 2.5 or 3 seconds, I can't remember. So it's even longer than Cole's. Even if her duration is longer. But her duration is much longer, so I guess it works out. But like I said, I think that either this or this is her best playstyle. Probably this. This is probably her best playstyle. And I will do my math rotation based on this. Alright, TLDR, yeah. So unfortunately, Nahida is not a 100% off-field Dendro applicator. She's conditional on the enemy surviving. In return, Hoyoverse has designed her to be more like a quick sword or low on-field duration main DPS, with her C6 looking really like Yelan in terms of playstyle, which is really good. Okay. For Cyno, she's not good for him, except against bosses, which will not need her E to be recast. In which case, she's even better than DMC/Cole. Only in this scenario. But seriously, just drop her for Cyno. That's what I see. For Nilou, she's still really good, but she demands more on field time than this MC and Cole, right? Because she's like a quick sword DPS or even a mid. So you either use Nahida as the mid, 19 to 20 seconds for the 20 to 22 seconds EM buff, or you use her as a quick sword, so you get like a 15-second EM buff with Kokomi mid. I mean, this is assuming that the Hydro needs her on field. If Hydro doesn't need her on field, then it will always be 19 to 22 second EM buff. Now, quick swap for if you use Nahida as a quick swap in Nilou comp, I think Kokomi can still get to use her Q and hit a few times. I don't know whether I should even call it a Kokomi main at that point in time, but yeah. So as for her Dendro application, I will look into detail when we update her in Nilou comp. But the good thing is, if that's the case, right? If Kokomi is going to be using her Q normal attacks in a short duration in order to accommodate Nahida's quick sword playstyle, guess you don't need clamp. You can go 2 tenacity with 2 gilded dreams or 2 wondrous troops. Yep. Which is like the same setup for Nilou, right? So I think her best comp may either be Nilou or Agra spread with Yae Fisher. Yae/Fisher. The second Dendro in the Agra spec can be Cole, can be DMC, or maybe even Tighnari. So I'm pretty excited to explore these two options, these few options. Share a DMC here. Otherwise, the DMC supporters will kill me. So for details on energy generation, ICD, etc., do check out the specific sections. Now remember, all of the above are very early beta info, so very subject to change. I will update the changes when we have either the updated data mine information or at least leaks with screen captures of updated talent changes. Okay. Alright, Nahida video series. Oh my god, how did this video become 1 hour? Because I had to explain so much about her unique kit, her constellations, and do like a kit summary, right? But at the very least, we've finished the detailed kit analysis. Next up will be either the Nilou comp or Agra spec. Order not confirmed yet. We have not decided which to do first. And we have artifact comparison. We will have weapon comparison slash specific weapon map. Okay. And obviously the usual words, constellation refinement comparison too. Whew. So this has been really long. My throat is really, really parched. So let me just quickly say this. She is not 100% Dendro of your applicator. Don't expect her to be that. She's a frequent quick swap character with her off-field being very conditional on whether the enemy survive. Okay, if you don't use her quick sword, or even as a main DPS. So she's more towards the main and quick sword role rather than the off-field applicator role. Frequent quick sword. I always need to remember to add the frequent there. Okay, so anyway, I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. If you like the content, remember the video and click subscribe for more. Thanks everyone for watching. I really appreciate you putting in your time for this. If you don't have the time, at least look at the kit summary and the TLDR. Okay? Oh, and the constellation summary. Okay, bye. Thanks for watching.